That's okay. So we're going to sing one more song. This is called Jaya Radha Madhava. It's a song glorifying Lord Krishna in Vrindavan, which is the place on earth where he appeared 5,000 years ago. Krishna is a name for God the Father. Yes. Yes, Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Bihari. Shri Shri Radha Giridhari Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Karthik Vrata Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So once again, thank everyone for coming. Hare Krishna, taking your time on this Sunday evening. Is anyone here for the first time? Hey, thank you. So 1, 2, 3. Very nice, thank you. How did you hear about us? Aha. Oh, very good. Oh, very good, very good. Have you been to any of the other Hare Krishna events? Okay, it's the first time. Are you from San Diego?
I'm from Turkey.
Oh, very good, very good. Oh, very good. Well, we're so happy that you came, and really nice that you're here. So, just to give a little background, this is a temple of Krishna. Krishna is a name for God, and it literally means all attractive. The idea that God has so many wonderful qualities, that God is naturally attractive to everyone. And not only that, but because God has an unlimited capacity for relationships, for relating with people, with everyone, with animals, with every living being, with every spirit soul, therefore that relationship can be completely genuine, completely fulfilling, completely satisfying, completely enlivening, like that, right? So Krishna is a very special name for God from the Sanskrit tradition of ancient India. It's a Sanskrit name, actually. And there's a very long tradition of what we call devotional service. It's a process where people can engage their mind and their voices and their active physical senses, everything we have in service to God. And by doing so, the idea is that all of these faculties that we employ in that service become spiritualized. Sometimes the example is given that if you take an iron rod, which is just iron, and if you put it in the fire for a long time, it'll turn red hot. So much like fire that if you then touch it to a piece of paper, the paper will ablaze immediately. So although it's just iron, it takes on the quality of fire. So the idea is that by practically engaging in loving service to Krishna, that we gradually become spiritualized. So that's kind of where we're going. So tonight's discussion might seem a little esoteric if you're just here for the first time. It's a special month in our tradition. It's called Karthik. And what I was just explaining in this particular month is even more enhanced. Actually, people try to kind of go for it, and do even more spiritual things than they normally do. Who's that? Very good question. That is Srila Prabhupada. That is called a murti, or a statue. He's a great sage from India who brought these teachings to the Western world, and he translated like about 80 volumes of ancient Sanskrit literatures about spiritualism into English, about devotion to Krishna. And he traveled all over the world establishing temples, just like this one. And these books have been translated into all the languages of the world. Actually, there's even something going on in Turkey. It's a little bit in its more, not quite as developed as here. It started there a little later. So actually all over the world, yeah. Okay, so really glad everybody's here. And so anyhow, as I was mentioning, this month is called Karthik. And it's a very, very special time when devotees of Krishna, just try to get more involved in their bhakti. Bhakti means loving service to God. Like that, sometimes bhakti is called the yoga of love, where one reposes one's loving propensity in God, right? So traditionally this month is the month where it's devotees of Krishna will go to Vrindavan, India. It's a place in India where Lord Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago. And there's 5,000 temples there. And the place is just saturated with Krishna bhakti, like that. So devotees will go there and they will chant the names of God more, like we were just singing. They'll also chant on beads, kind of like a rosary, but they chant the Hare Krishna mantra that we were just singing. And they worship Krishna, they think of Krishna, they read about Krishna. They just try to increase all of their devotional activities so that their consciousness becomes closer to Krishna, more internally absorbed, like that. So I remember some years ago, I had a little glimpse of this. I had the good fortune to visit Vrindavan, and it was towards the end of the month of Karthik, and it was time to leave, unfortunately. And when you're in India, when you're in Vrindavan, it's a very small village. You have to take a train and a bus and then this and that, and to Delhi, and then you get on another airplane, and then you fly back to America, like that. So as I was leaving, it happened to be Ekadasi, which is even within the Karthik month, Ekadasi is also a very special day for remembering the Lord. So as I was pulling out in a car to get along the way to New Delhi, I noticed this line of pilgrims. It was about 6 abreast, and I don't know, about a mile long. There's probably 1,000 people, maybe more than 1,000 people. And this is very early in the morning. The sky was just starting to get a little light. It was even before sunrise, And these people were all barefoot. And there were all kinds of different people. You could see some people were very well dressed. Some people were, just very simply dressed, like farmers, bankers, lawyers, doctors, housewives, you name it, children, grandparents. And they were all walking, and what they were doing was they got a very early start in the morning because they wanted to circumambulate, to walk in a circle around the entire area of Vrindavan, and while doing so to visit many of the temples there and many of the places where Lord Krishna had performed his pastimes with his devotees 5,000 years ago. So I was so moved by that, that here are people who actually understand that after this short life that we're living right now, say 50, 60, 70, 80, maximum 100 years, that life goes on, that within this body, within this car, this vehicle, this machine of the material body, right? Just like you get a car and it's great when it's brand new and you can do so many things, and then gradually it gets old and old and old, and then, eventually it stops working, right? And then you have to get a new car. So similarly, I can see that these people understood that we are eternal and that we need to get closer, we need to develop our loving relationship with Krishna, like that. So they were using their time very, very wisely, So this is a great inspiration. Of course, many, many things about Krishna are very bewildering, and I was going to read actually a verse. The idea that God, appears on earth and not only appears on earth, but when Krishna appeared on earth, he manifested very human-like pastimes. Actually, he was living in a village of cowherds where they were very, very busy taking care of cows. And he would go out and he would herd the cows, and while doing so would play with all of his young boyfriends. When they turned about 5, 6, they were trained and they were given the chance to go out and take care of the cows. So every morning they would go out into the pastures and take all the cows, and while they were herding them, they were playing all their games like that. So many great sages and great spiritualists who were on the planet at the time became very amazed, because gradually they understood that actually the Supreme Lord has appeared right here on this earth. And what is the Supreme Lord doing? They're performing these very innocent, human-like pastimes, right? And this was a great wonder. So one of these persons who was quite astonished, actually, by this she was a queen. Her name was Queen Kunti. She was from a royal family. And she happened to be related by family with Krishna, with the family that Krishna appeared in. So I'm just going to read some beautiful prayers that she offered to Krishna later on. And this is one of them, which kind of gets to the heart of what we're talking about this month. Just give me 1 second here. It's verse 31. Yeah, okay. 31, yeah. My dear Krishna, Yashoda took up a rope to bind you when you committed an offense, and your perturbed eyes overflooded with tears, which washed the mascara from your eyes. And you were afraid, though fear personified is afraid of you. This sight is bewildering to me. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here is another example of the bewilderment created by the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the supreme in all circumstances, as already explained. Here is a specific example of the Lord's being the supreme, and at the same time, a plaything in the presence of his pure devotee. The Lord's pure devotee renders service unto the Lord out of unalloyed love only, and while discharging such devotional service, the pure devotee forgets the position of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord also accepts the loving service of his devotees more relishably when the service is rendered spontaneously out of pure affection, without anything of reverential admiration. Generally, the Lord is worshipped by the devotees in a reverential attitude, but the Lord is meticulously pleased when the devotee, out of pure affection and love, considers the Lord to be less important than himself. The Lord's pastimes in the original abode of Goloka Vrindavan are exchanged in that spirit. The friends of Krishna consider him one of them. They do not consider him to be of reverential importance. The parents of the Lord, who are all pure devotees, consider him a child only. The Lord accepts the chastisements of the parents more cheerfully than the prayers of the Vedic hymns. Similarly, he accepts the reproaches of his fiancées more palatably than the Vedic hymns. When Lord Krishna was present in this material world to manifest his eternal pastimes of the transcendental realm of Goloka Vrindavan as an attraction for the people in general, he displayed a unique picture of subordination before his foster mother, Yashoda. The Lord, in his naturally childish, playful activities, used to spoil the stocked butter of Mother Yashoda by breaking the pots and distributing the contents to his friends and playmates, including the celebrated monkeys of Vrindavan, who took advantage of the Lord's munificence. Mother Yashoda saw this, and out of her pure love, she wanted to make a show of punishment for her transcendental child. She took a rope and threatened the Lord that she would tie him up as is generally done in the ordinary household. Seeing the rope in the hands of Mother Yashoda, the Lord bowed down his head and began to weep just like a child, and tears rolled down his cheeks, washing off the black ointment smeared about his beautiful eyes. This picture of the Lord is adored by Kunti Devi because she is conscious of the Lord's supreme position. He is feared often by fear personified, yet he is afraid of his mother, who wanted to punish him just in an ordinary manner. Kunti was conscious of the exalted position of Krishna, whereas Yashoda was not. Therefore, Yashoda's position was more exalted than Kunti's. Mother Yashoda got the Lord as her child, and the Lord made her forget altogether that her child was the Lord himself. If Mother Yashoda had been conscious of the exalted position of the Lord, she would certainly have hesitated to punish the Lord. But she was made to forget this situation because the Lord wanted to make a complete gesture of childishness before the affectionate Yashoda. This exchange of love between the mother and the son was performed in a natural way, and Kunti, remembering the scene, was bewildered, and she could do nothing but praise the transcendental maternal and filial love. Indirectly, Mother Yashoda is praised for her unique position of love, for she could control even the all-powerful Lord as her beloved child. So, this is an illustration of this very unique situation where the Supreme Lord, who is generally known as Ajita, right? Ajita means unconquerable. And we understand that when Krishna was present on earth later, when he was performing his later pastimes, so many great personalities tried to conquer like that, tried to attack so many things. But Krishna, again and again and again, it's seen the Supreme Lord is completely unconquerable. But here we see that Ajita, he becomes Jito. He becomes conquered. What? By the love of his pure devotee. So why does God do this? Why does Krishna do this? Why does Krishna come to earth and perform these very human-like pastimes, right, which are so bewildering? Not only were they bewildering to Queen Kunti, right, when Krishna was manifesting these childhood pastimes, they were bewildering to many, many great personalities. Sure, thank you. For instance, we know that Lord Brahma, the first created being, right, at one point when Krishna had killed a great demon, I believe it was Aghasura, and this Aghasura demon had been a great threat, actually, to the established universal order. So much so that when Krishna killed this Aghasura, this giant demon, the demigods, the denizens of the higher planets who have portfolios in the universal government of God, some of them are in charge of the sun, the rain, the water, so many different important necessities of human life. They have cabinet positions, just like in the governments in this world. So when the demigods saw this great demon killed by Krishna, they were very happy. And they were beating on kettle drums, and they were saying, Jai, Jai. You know, they were showering flower petals down on Krishna like that. So it was making a lot of noise in the higher regions of the universe. And at that time, the chief demigod, Lord Brahma, we know that Lord Brahma, he's born directly from the Supreme Lord. He's actually the first created being in the material universe, right? So he's, you know, he's pretty much seen it all from the very beginning. So he hears all this celebration going on, and he's curious. He's looking down from his higher planet, and what's going on? And they say, oh, Krishna just killed the great Aghasura, and you know, who's this Krishna? Well, we think he's the Supreme Lord. So Brahma's like thinking, I don't know, you know, just looks like a little cowherd boy to me. He's running around with his friends, right? He's coming there, and he sees Krishna, you know, he's there with his friends. They're sitting around having lunch, right? So he's thinking, I don't know about this. Let me test this guy, right? So Lord Brahma has great mystic powers. So he says, let's just see. Everyone's saying he's my father. He doesn't look like my father. He looks like a little cowherd boy, So he, using his mystic power, he created a situation where the cows that the boys were herding, some of them wandered away. So then, not wanting to disturb his friend's lunch, when they noticed that some of the cows had wandered away, they were concerned, and Krishna said, no, you take your lunch, I'll go find the cows. So then Krishna went looking for the cows. But as he went looking, he couldn't find the cows, because the cows had actually been taken away by Brahma. Using his mystic powers, he had taken the cows away, and he had put them in a cave, and he had put them to sleep, like that. So then Krishna was surprised, where are the cows? And then he went back to tell the boys, and guess what? The boys weren't there. They had all been sitting there taking lunch, now all the boys were gone. So where did the boys go? Well, the same Brahma, this original demigod, he had taken all the boys and he had put them into a cave, right? Same cave, and put them to sleep. So then Krishna, he immediately thought, aha, this Brahma has come and he is, showing his mystic power, right? He's showing his mystic power. So let me teach let me teach him a thing or two about the actual situation. So then Krishna, he immediately expanded a whole new herd of cows and a whole new group of cowherd boys, right? So, and they finished their lunch, and at the end of the day they went back to the village. Meanwhile, Brahma, he had done this and he had gone back to his place, But then, after a very short time, he started thinking, I wonder, what if he is my father? What if he is God? What if he is, I might be playing with fire. His understanding of God is Lord Vishnu, who is an expansion of Krishna. So Brahma thought, I better go back and see what's going on, see what's come to pass. So he came back after a moment of his time. Of course, as you go higher and higher in the planets, there's time is relative. So although he had just gone back to his planet for a few moments, on Earth an entire year had passed. So anyway, he came back, and it was a year later. And he came to Vrindavan, and he was, skulking around in his, subtle form, so to speak. And he came upon a similar situation where the cows were there, apparently identical to the ones that he had put in the cave. And Krishna was there with the cowherd boys, and as a matter of fact, they were having lunch. And Krishna was there. He had a little handful of, sometimes they call it Yashoda yummies. It's a nice preparation of rice mixed with cut fruit and yogurt. Sometimes they call it Krishna surprise Yashoda yummies. A very nice preparation. He just, eating out of his hand. Just looked like a simple cowherd boy. The boys are all playing, stealing things from each other's lunch. Just a very ordinary scene, right? So, but Brahma's kind of bewildered because, wait a second, now how did they get out? So he went to the cave, and he saw they were all still sleeping in the cave. Well, wait a second, what is this? They're all here. And then he went back and he saw they were all there. And then he went back and, wait a second, they're all here. And, so then he was getting a little confused. Where did this how are there two sets of these same, living beings? And then he was trying to figure it out. And then Lord Krishna, he removed. In other words, Lord Krishna has many energies, and some of them are illusory energies. One of them is called Yogamaya. And Yogamaya is a curtain that Lord Krishna, one of his energies that makes things so that people don't see the actual spiritual situation. So Lord Krishna, at that moment, he removed this curtain of Yogamaya, and then Lord Brahma saw that the set of cows and boys that were playing with Krishna, they were all actually four-armed Vishnu forms. And at this point, Brahma is very intelligent. He has four heads, like a multi-processors, right, by today's lingo. And he's very, very intelligent. He's the engineer that creates all the diversities. Sometimes he's called the secondary creator. He creates all these diversities within the universe. So he's a very smart guy, right? But he was aware of Lord Vishnu. He was actually born from Lord Vishnu. He was born atop a lotus flower growing from Lord Vishnu's navel. So he knew that there was Lord Vishnu and that Lord Vishnu was God and that Lord Vishnu was his father and his master. But he never knew that there could be more than one Lord Vishnu. So suddenly he saw that all of these cows and all of these boys were all his worshipful Lord, Narayan. And at that point, all of his brains just crashed, and he just like, it was just total overload, just like, more than he could even begin to fathom. So he fainted, and then when he came to, the same scene was before him, and at that point, he immediately understood. So he surrendered like that. So, and he offered very, very beautiful, very, very beautiful prayers to Lord Krishna like that. And of course, Lord Krishna, he was, very absorbed in playing with his friends. So although this first and greatest of demigods was offering all these exalted prayers, Lord Krishna was like, okay, very good, that's enough. Go back to your planet now, You've created enough mischief for today, So like that. So, Brahma was bewildered, right? And this whole temple, you see in the four corners, we see Krishna in his form as Giridhari, and on the altar, in the central altar, we see Shri Radha Giridhari, Shri Radha Giriraj. So this form of Krishna is the lifter of Govardhan Hill, right? So why did Krishna lift Govardhan Hill? Who would like to answer that? Why did Krishna lift Govardhan Hill? To protect the residents of Vrindavan. Thank you. And what was he protecting them from? Huh? Great rainfall. Right. Lord Indra's wrath. Exactly. There was a great, great rainfall. There was a biggest storm ever. There was a storm that made Hurricane Ian, that just hit Florida a few weeks ago, look like a California rain, right? A few little drops, come out in the morning, and the dirt is smeared on your car because a few drops fell at night, right? So it made Hurricane Ian look like a California rain. So this storm was so great, and why did Lord Indra cause such a big rainfall on Vrindavan, particularly? You already answered one. Somebody else?
Because he wanted to be worshipped, and then the citizens started worshipping Govardhan Hill because Krishna said, don't worship Indra, worship Govardhan Hill. But really, they ended up worshipping Krishna because they realized that, Krishna was the source of all things, and, they don't need to worship just any old thing like Govardhan Hill or Indra or anything like that, because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The Vrijavasis knew no one but Krishna, and they loved Krishna with all of their hearts, all of the residents of Vrindavan. And Krishna loves the residents of Vrindavan with all his heart, right? So when Krishna said, they were about to perform, as you said, worship of Lord Indra as an annual affair, because they're farmers, they're cowherds. Indra provides the rain, so once a year they offer a big thank you to Indra, called a sacrifice like that. And Krishna said, oh, don't bother with that, like that. So he convinced him not to, because he had detected that Indra had become quite proud. But Indra, here's another one. He's the king of heaven. There's a series of heavenly planets, and he's the king of the heavenly planets. So he also became bewildered. These demigods live for thousands and millions of years. They're very, very learned, they're very wise, they're very intelligent. But again, these childhood pastimes of Krishna were so natural, so beautiful, so simple, so loving, that these demigods even, they just couldn't, so Indra, same thing, he was bewildered. Who is this little boy that is telling them not to worship me? How dare he? Doesn't he know who I am? Right? So many of these pastimes happen during Karthik this month, and this Govardhan Puja specifically is coming up. It's a festival we'll be celebrating shortly in a week, 10 days or so. So anyhow, Indra became bewildered about that how could this little cowherd boy be God, right? So when his pride was hurt, he decided to throw everything he had at Vrindavan, right? So he called for these Samvartaka clouds, right? And these clouds have a particular function, and that function comes about once in a great, great while when it's time for the cyclical devastation of the universe. These clouds are part of a huge, huge pralaya, a huge devastation like that covers many, many planets like that. So they're not ordinary clouds, you know. So anyway, Indra called for these Samvartaka clouds, and he said, go to Vrindavan and throw everything you have. And they were kind of scared of the job because they're thinking, well, Indra, you know, what if this little cowherd boy is God? You know, the clouds were a little smarter than Indra. You know, they were a little afraid of the job, but Indra said, no, you go there, and I'll follow you on my elephant, and I'll be throwing my thunderbolts and doing all these things. So they went, and they began flooding Vrindavan like that. And as soon as the flood became so fierce, and the winds and the rain, naturally, all of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, all of the cowherd boys and the cowherd girls and the cowherd men and the cowherd women and the cows and their calves, everyone went running to Krishna. Everyone went running to Krishna. And Krishna, seeing the distress that Indra was causing the inhabitants of Vrindavan, he immediately wanted to protect them. So he said, do not fear. And at this time, Krishna was it 7? Huh? Yeah? Krishna had been manifesting his pastimes on earth for 7 years. So he appeared like a 7-year-old cowherd boy. So he walks over to Govardhan Hill. Later on, if you go, many of you have seen, of course, but if you go out onto the patio, there's a beautiful mural painting, and in that painting you'll also see that big rocky hill in the background is Govardhan Hill. And those days it was even bigger. That's a long story. So anyway, Lord Krishna walked over to the hill, and in India, and it's kind of there from olden times, from Vedic times, the right hand is considered more prominent than the left hand, and everywhere, forever, the pinky is considered to be the weakest of the fingers, right? So anyway, Krishna walks over to this giant hill, this little 7-year-old cowherd boy, and he sticks his left pinky on the bottom of the hill. Just like in these 4 corners, you see him holding that hill. And Krishna picks up the Govardhan Hill, just as a child picks up an umbrella, like that. And he holds it very, very high. And he says, all of you can enter under the hill, and you'll be safe with all of your cows and all of your family and all of your possessions. So everyone came under the hill, and they stayed under there for 7 days. And actually, for all of the Vrijavasis, this was a great festival, because normally they would only get to see Krishna once or twice a day. When Krishna and all the boys were going through the village, taking the cows out to the cow pastures, everybody would be running out onto the street to see Krishna and the boys off. They all wanted to see Krishna. Krishna was the focus of their life. He was the focus of their love. And they would see him in the evening when he was coming back. But during the day, they were way, way out in the cowherd pastures. They were playing in the forest, so they didn't get to see Krishna to their heart's content. But for this, it ended up being 1 week. It took Indra a week to realize that this is not going to work. Indra was throwing everything he had, and the rain was pouring, and the lightning was thundering, and it was like that. And they were all just under there, and for an uninterrupted week, they were just having a festival of being with Krishna 24/7. And they were just fully satisfied. There was no hunger, there was no thirst, there was no excessive heat, cold, there was no anxiety. They were just feasting their eyes and their hearts on Lord Krishna. Krishna was protecting them. Of course, even in the midst of this bewilderment exists. At one point, in other words, Krishna exchanges his love with all the residents of Vrindavan. And the significance of Krishna appearing and performing these wonderful pastimes in Vrindavan, it was touched on here in the purport, is to actually show us what is the real standard of life. Like everyone says, everyone who has on a spiritual path or a religious path says that one should love God. But Srila Prabhupada has pointed out that in order to really develop love for someone, you have to know that someone, isn't it? You have to know that someone. And this, again, I mentioned in the beginning, this name of God, Krishna. Krishna means all attractive. And Krishna can attract the minds and the hearts of everyone, liberated souls, everyone, right? So Krishna appeared on earth. He only appears once in a long, long while, like the Vedas state. He appears like once every 8,600,000,000 and odd million years. And when he appears to exhibit the self-same pastimes that are eternally going on. When he comes here, it's called Gokula Vrindavan, that are eternally going on in the spiritual sky in Goloka Vrindavan. Loka means planet, and Go means cows. Planet of the Cows. So I'm dating myself here, but when I was young, there was a movie called Planet of the Apes. You don't want to go there, but the Planet of the Cows, we want to go. Right? So anyway, Goloka Vrindavan is where Krishna lives in the spiritual world. And what's going on there is exactly what he manifested here on earth in Vrindavan. He manifested a wonderful place that was full of devotees who were lovingly serving Krishna, and some of them were lovingly serving Krishna with appreciation, and some of them were serving him in a mood of service. They wanted to cook for him and clean for him and do things for him. All of them wanted to serve him like that. And then specifically, some of them wanted to serve Krishna as friends, right? So many of the devotees were Krishna's friends, and Krishna was showing that if you love Krishna as a friend, you will have the most wonderful experience of friendship that you can ever imagine, right? Just imagine, like we have a son, of course now he's grown up, but when he was little, like you watch your children playing with other boys and doing things and running around, and they're always looking for some excitement, isn't it? They're always looking for some suspense and some danger. Even if there isn't some danger, they're trying to find some, you know what I mean? Like one time, Mother Lottely, who lives here in San Diego, we had moved to Florida, and my wife and I, she's probably cooking lunch, and I was obliviously doing some work or whatever on my computer. So our friend, luckily, with the advent of social media and young people putting everything they do on social media, so we get a call from San Diego from Mother Lottely, who said, "Do you know that your son and his friends right now are taking turns jumping off the roof?" And we're like, "What?" So, we ran outside, and sure enough, they were taking turns jumping off the roof. Luckily nobody broke a leg, but it was one of those, like, we got there just in the nick of time. So we're kind of grateful to Lottely, that his room was on the second floor, and there was a window that went onto the roof over the porch, and they were checking it out, so boys enjoy doing this kind of stuff, right? Running and playing and finding lost civilizations, in the bamboos behind the house, and just all kinds of stuff, right? So just imagine these cowherd boys are running around, and they're having so much fun, and they're playing and they're wrestling, and sometimes Krishna's beating them, and sometimes they're beating him, and they're just all like having a great time and chasing the cows and picking fruit off of the trees. But when Krishna was here, that sometimes demons would come. This is a long story, and there's not time for the details, but demons would come and try to challenge him, right? So sometimes it happened. The cowherd boys were out with Krishna herding the cows, and one day this giant heron came, and you can see herons, down by Mission Bay, but this heron was like 30, 40 feet tall, his beak was like 10 feet long, his teeth were like the size of tires on a car, and suddenly this heron just comes out of nowhere, rah, and grabs Krishna and swallows him. And all the boys are like, "Oh no!" And like the ground's shaking, and this guy's so big. Just imagine, you look at a heron that's 4 feet tall, okay. You look at a heron that's 40 feet tall, So, but then what happened when Krishna went within the mouth of the heron suddenly started to feel this blazing, burning in its throat. So much so that the heron was unable to continue holding Krishna in his mouth, and he threw him up. And then Krishna, he grabbed the heron by his beaks, pulled him in half and killed him like that. So like, It's all in a day's work, So then, that night the cowherd boys are all back home. In the evening they bring the cows back, and all the boys are like, "Mother, guess what happened today? Father, this giant bird came. The ground was shaking." And and the parents are like, "Yeah, sure, son. Did this really happen? But the thing was that these kind of things were happening every day. One day, a giant demon assumed the form of a bull. And this bull, like in a modern world, they have bullfights, right? Of course, it's horrible. But the bulls are very, very fierce, right? When a bull gets angry, it's a very, very dangerous creature. So the same kind of thing. This giant bull came thundering in, but it was, 10 times the size of an ordinary bull. So big and so heavy and so powerful, the ground was shaking, and it was like, doing that thing where they stop in one place and they're digging the earth up with their feet and they start making this big roaring sound, and the roar was so loud you could hear it for miles, And it was obvious that he had come for Krishna, So Krishna tightens, all the boys run and climb up in trees and everybody's watching, and Krishna tightens his belt, and the bull comes charging and it's like, Krishna grabs him by the tail, and the bull lands 20 feet away, and it's like, what? How did that happen? This little cowherd boy just picked up this giant bull and threw him down, So then the bull kind of comes back to his senses and reorients himself, and there he is, comes charging again. Anyway, Krishna killed him, So these things are going on every day. One day there was a whole herd of demons took the form of giant donkeys, So all these things, giant horses, so many things were going on like that, and the boys are coming home. So just imagine, you're just out there all day herding your cows, having fun playing, and you get to watch Krishna fight with some giant monster and kill him, and and you're part of it, You're part of the team, because generally speaking, this yoga maya that was mentioned earlier, this is this special potency. Krishna just wants to have fun. He wants to share love with his friends in all of these different moods of servitorship, of loving relationship. So he covers their ability to understand that he's God, to understand how great he is, so that they can play with him in a more natural way, so that Mother Yashoda, King Nanda, they can see him in a natural way as their son. It's all meant to be very natural. So Krishna covers them. At the same time, so they feel like, yeah, we're just buds with Krishna, Sometimes, back to the moment when he's holding up Govardhan Hill. So these cowherd boys, because they're so used to just being equals and friends with Krishna, after a while, a couple of them came up and said, "Hey, Krishna, you're probably tired by now. They had their cowherd sticks, they put them up. If you want to take a break, we can hold it up." Krishna's like, "No, well, you can help me, but I'll keep holding it, because, but they're thinking, if Krishna can hold up this hill, we can too. You know what I mean? It's such a sweet mood, So then you have the devotees that have this feelings of paternal affection for Krishna. And of course, the central devotees are Mother Yashoda, like we read about here, that Krishna, he was being naughty. He was stealing butter and ghee from all of the neighboring houses and yogurt. Krishna is actually very famous. He has many, many names. One name is Makhanachor. Makhanachor means the butter thief, the yogurt thief, right? So sometimes in India, actually I was at one temple, and they have a deity, they call him Baal Gopal, and it's just Krishna by himself, and he's got this big sling of yogurt over his shoulder, and he looks like he's running, So, to enhance the paternal love of all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, Krishna and all of his boyfriends, they would sneak around to the houses, and they were all cowherds, so they all had storerooms where they would keep the milk in different stages. They would turn the milk into yogurt, and then eventually into butter, and then eventually into ghee. So Krishna and his friends would sneak in there, and they would steal the butter and the yogurt. They didn't need it. Krishna's father was the king of Vrindavan. He had 900,000 cows. It wasn't really like there was any shortage, but they were doing it for fun. And Krishna was doing it to increase this paternal affection of all of the elder cowherd women and the elder cowherd men like that. So anyway, one day in his own home, right, Mother Yashoda was nursing him, giving him milk, and at a certain point, she noticed that milk was boiling over on the stove. So she set him down and she ran to attend to the milk that was boiling over. And Krishna, because he had been abruptly stopped from nursing, he became angry. He was a little baby at this point, right? So he looked around and he saw a pot of butter. He broke it. And then he took it to another room and started feeding it to his friends, the monkeys. So then when Yashoda had attended to the milk, she came back, his mother Yashoda, and she saw the broken pot, and she saw the butter-smeared footprints, so it wasn't that hard to find him. She found him in another room, and he was busily engaged feeding the butter to the monkeys. So she thought, Krishna's been getting in this kind of trouble. All the neighbors have been complaining. He's doing all this kind of stuff. I have to teach him a lesson. So she started chasing him. And she had a rope in her hands, right? And so she finally caught him. He let her catch him, but then she thought that this scene that we just read about, that Kunti was describing, that actually the ointment on his eyes was, becoming washed off by his tears. He was actually manifesting tears, and she thought, she threw the rope away. She didn't want him, it won't be good for him to be too frightened, like that. But then she thought, she threw the stick away, sorry. But I better tie him up just to teach him a lesson, right? So then, we all know the story, but it's very, very beautiful how the unconquerable Lord becomes conquered by love. So she ties him up, but when she gets to the final knot, well, it's 2 inches too short. So she grabs another rope. Finally, she's used all the ropes in the house. Still, it's 2 inches too short. So she's marveling at this. This is very, very. How does this happen? How does this happen? This is against the laws of physics. That you bring another rope that's a foot long, you should have 2 inches, right? So finally, she's perspiring, and Krishna sees that she's endeavored very, very nicely, and of course she's doing it all out of love, right? So Krishna says, "Okay, Mother Yashoda, she's serving me so nicely. Let me let her succeed." So he lets her tie him up, right? So then he's tied up, and then she decides to attend to some other household duties, giving him like a little, anyone has kids, sometimes you give your kids a timeout, right? Take a timeout, right? You've been naughty, right? So then she's off doing something, and then Krishna starts thinking, well, first, Mother Yashoda didn't properly finish feeding me. So naturally I broke a pot of butter and, gave the contents to my friends, the monkeys. Now she's tied me up. This is even worse. She's made an even bigger offense. Now I must do something even naughtier, right? So he looks around. She had tied him up to a big wooden grinding mortar that you use for grinding grains and things. So he looks out, and in his yard there's these 2 giant Arjuna trees, like, huge, heavy trees, not little trees, big heavy trees. Actually, they've been growing there for thousands of years, very ancient trees. So he thought, now I'll pull down those trees, we'll show her a thing or two, So little baby, he's crawling out there. And when he goes, the trees are close together, so he goes between, but the big wooden mortar that he's pulling behind him gets lodged between the trees. And with his itty-bitty baby superhuman God's strength, he just pulls the trees down. And of course, just imagine 2 40-foot trees or something come crashing down right now on the patio, right? We'd all be running out there. What happened, right? So everybody hears this big sound and they all come running out. And what in the world? And because demons had been coming and attacking Krishna, everybody was already kind of sensitive to that. So they think, did some monsters come and try to attack the baby, and like that? So, and then there were some little children playing nearby, and they said, no, what happened was baby Krishna crawled out, and the mortar got stuck between the trees, and the trees came crashing down. Krishna pulled them down, and the parents were like, that's not possible, So, anyway, in this way, Krishna is increasing the love of his devotees in all of these different relationships. He's exhibiting the love that is naturally exchanged between the Supreme Lord and his loving devotees, right? As friends, as parents, as lovers, right? In the same month, just at the beginning of this Karthik month and at the end, Lord Krishna performed his celebrated rasa dance. If you look at the second picture back from the altar on that wall, it's a beautiful painting of Lord Krishna's rasa dance. And in that, all of the cowherd girls of Vrindavan who wanted to serve Lord Krishna in the mood of conjugal love, Lord Krishna on a full moon night, he played his flute and invited them, and they all came, and he danced with them. And showing all of us that Lord Krishna has an unlimited capacity to exchange love with each and every one of us. Although there were thousands of cowherd girls, Lord Krishna expanded himself so that each of the girls was dancing with him. And each one felt that they were dancing with Krishna, and they were, right, like that. And in this way, Lord Krishna shows us that as we surrender unto him, he will reward us accordingly. As we offer him our hearts, he will offer his heart back to us, right? These Vrindavan pastimes, they actually show the highest manifestation of love, right? Love requires vulnerability. And when we say that the Supreme Lord, the unconquerable Lord, becomes conquered by his devotees, we see that the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, right, the Lord of all sacrifices and austerities, is also the best friend and well-wisher of all living entities. And when someone purely loves the Lord becomes vulnerable. He becomes conquered by the love of those devotees, and he will do anything for them. He will reciprocate with them fully to their heart's content and to his heart's content, because that's all Krishna wants from each and every one of us. So when he performs these pastimes here on earth in the sacred village of Vrindavan rather, he is performing those pastimes to show us what life is meant to be. We're not meant to be working a 9-to-5 in San Diego or Los Angeles. We're not meant to be driving these machines and slugging it out, with taxes and all these things. We're actually meant to have a loving life full of bliss and knowledge in loving devotional service to Lord Krishna. That is our birthright. It's that Lord Chaitanya, he explained that pure loving devotion to Krishna is eternally established in each and every one of our hearts. That is our natural birthright. And if we begin again the process of loving devotional service to Krishna, beginning by hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna, singing about Krishna, naturally we'll become inspired to serve Krishna according to our personality, according to who we are. And by, again, dedicating ourselves, body, mind, words, in loving service to Krishna, right? Then our eternally established within our heart, that love for Krishna which is eternally established in our heart, will reawaken. This whole process of Krishna consciousness is about reawakening the dormant love for Krishna which is there within our heart. It's not something to be brought in from another source. It's already there, but it must be revived. And that process of revival is what we're doing here. Lord Krishna says, engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer your obeisances to me, worship me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. So this is Lord Krishna's invitation to all of us. And that's why Srila Prabhupada, his devotee, came to the West and traveled all over the world spreading this good news of our eternal relationship with Krishna. That's why Lord Krishna manifested himself on earth to reveal these topmost loving pastimes, to attract us, to inspire us, to again engage in loving devotional service. So anyway, I better stop there because of the time. Thank you all for your kind attention. So any comments or, thank you. Any comments or questions or corrections? Feel free. Yes?
When you said 9 to 5,
Wait.
okay.
Go ahead.
When you said we're not meant to do a 9 to 5, you don't just mean run off to the Himalayas, do you?
No.
Okay.
No. What
Just
I
checking.
meant, thank you, that's a very good point. What I meant is just that while we're here, we have a variety of duties. and they are all relevant to our situation in life, right? But we also have higher priorities that we have to focus on, right? And those higher priorities are looking out for our eternal well-being. Just like when you have children. Do you have children? Mm-hmm. So you want your children to grow up healthy and strong. You want them to go to school, right? Children just want to play all day, but you, at a certain point, you say, no, you have to go to school, you have to learn, you have to get guidance, you have to develop in a healthy way, right? And the reason we do that is because we want them to have a bright future. We want them to have a healthy future. We know that someday we won't be there to take care of them, and they're going to have to stand on their own feet and be successful and be healthy and happy, right? So naturally, while we're executing life's priorities, it's always important to be looking at the future, right? And because we are eternal, and because right now we are living in bodies that are temporary, that's the only thing with the 9 to 5. I was just using that expression, right? My first job was a graveyard shift. It was 12 to 8. So, but the idea being that while we're doing our duties in relation to our bodies and minds and our families, and all those things are very, very important and very relevant, and we should take them very seriously. We simultaneously have to be reviving our eternal loving relationship with Krishna, and also sharing that with those we love and those around us, right? So yeah, it's not go off to the Himalayas. Of course, maybe once a year, go off to the Himalayas, whenever possible. Srila Prabhupada encouraged us to go to these holy places, and while we're there, to increase our hearing and chanting, just like we were talking about Karthik and Vrindavan, like that. But then, of course, we come back and we live our lives, but we just have to constantly be enriching our lives. And that's why this temple is here. This temple is the embassy of Vrindavan, and Vrindavan is the embassy of Goloka Vrindavan, right? And the whole idea is to situate ourselves in such a way that we always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna, right? So we just have to make that kind of the goal of our life, the centerpiece of our priorities, that while we're executing all of life's duties, we always keep that prime duty, right? There's Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, right? All these occupational duties, but then there's Prema, Pumartha, Mahan, pure love for Krishna, and that is the most important of life's goals. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, I think, thank you for bearing with me. I think the next part of the program, we're going to have another kirtan, yeah? If anybody hasn't offered Lord Krishna a candle, a ghee wick, you're welcome to do so during the kirtan. This is one of the special features of Karthik. You can offer Krishna a candle, and while offering it, offer your prayers to Lord Krishna, especially praying that you may become fully absorbed in pure loving devotion. Thank you again. Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada.
Thank you.